The Zeldar did not expect humans to be fast. They did not expect them to be coordinated. And they certainly did not expect Rip O'Reilly. Elias sprinted down the dimly lit corridor, plasma bolts scorching past his head. Rip was ahead, carving a path with his stolen alien rifle, firing with wild enthusiasm. These things got unlimited ammo. Rip called out, "No." Samara snapped, racing beside him, and stopped shooting from the hip. Rip ignored her, blasting an overhead support beam. It collapsed behind them, cutting off their pursuers. "See? Tactical thinking." Juno groaned. "You mean reckless destruction." Elias skidded to a stop at an intersection, checking Samara's holographic display. "Which way to the hangar?" Samara's fingers danced over her wrist console. "Down that service tunnel, about 6 floors below us." Juno looked up. Down." Elias followed her gaze. The tunnel's entry hatch was above them, built for Zeldar physiology, long-limbed, vertical climbers. Rip slung his rifle over his shoulder. "What? You guys didn't train for wall climbing?" "We're gonna die," Juno muttered. Elias grabbed the nearest conduit pipe and tested it. "Sturdy enough. We climb." Rip hooped, grabbing onto the nearest ledge and hauling himself up like a madman. Juno sighed. "I hate this job." They ascended, using whatever holds they could find. The metal was slick, and the gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, making every movement a strain. Below, Zeldar warriors regrouped, screeching orders. Halfway up, the station shook. Samara cursed. "What now?" Elias activated his communicator. "What's happening?" A garbled voice answered. "This is the Osiris. Zeldar fleet repositioning. Power surges detected. You need to move." Juno's grip slipped. Elias lunged, grabbing her wrist. "Hold on." She gasped, dangling for a second before finding footing. "I hate this job." Rip, already at the top, reached down and hauled them up. "Come on, slowpokes." They clambered through the hatch, landing in a dim maintenance corridor. Samara pulled up the map. Hangars 3 sections ahead. Elias nodded. "We move fast." They bolted. Behind them, the Zeldar breached the tunnel, their screeches growing louder. Then the lights flickered. Samara frowned. Something's wrong. A deep hum vibrated through the walls. Juno's translator implant processed the alien transmissions flooding the station. She paled. "They're bringing the automated sentries online." Elias cursed. "How bad?" Samara looked at her console. Worst case scenario? Instant death." Rip grinned. "Sound like a challenge." The corridor lit up with scanning lasers. A mechanical voice growled in Zeldar dialect. Unauthorized organics detected. Neutralization commencing. Panels in the walls hissed open, revealing sleek, insect-like drones with razor-sharp limbs and glowing red sensors. Rip raised his rifle. "So do we fight these, or—" "Run!" Elias shouted. They sprinted, dodging as the drones lunged with bladed appendages. One slashed at Juno's shoulder. She barely ducked in time. Samara pulled out a modified pulse grenade from her tool belt. "Cover your ears." She hurled it down the corridor. The sonic blast ruptured the drone sensors, making them twitch and screech in confusion. "Nice!" Rip cheered. They burst into Hangar Bay, a sprawling, cavernous space filled with docked alien ships. Zeldar warriors scrambled toward them, weapons drawn. "Pick a ship," Elias ordered. Samara pointed to a sleek scout-class interceptor. "That one. I can override the controls." They dashed toward it. Plasma bolts rained down. Rip tackled a Zeldar mid-charge, body slamming it into the floor. He grabbed the alien's energy blade, activating its shimmering edge. "Oh, I like this," he said, twirling it. Juno and Elias covered Samara as she yanked open the interceptor's access panel. Sparks flew as she hot-wired the console. "Almost there," she shouted. Elias ducked as a plasma blast scorched past his head. "No pressure, but we've got seconds." Rip leaped onto a cargo crate and threw himself at a Zeldar officer. The alien hissed, moments before Rip plunged a stolen energy blade through its chest. Juno winced. He really enjoys this. The interceptor's engines hummed to life. Samara kicked the panel closed. Go, go, go! They scrambled inside. Rip was last, turning to flip off the remaining Zeldar before sealing the hatch. Elias jumped into the pilot's seat. Strap in. The ship lurched as he fired the thrusters, blasting out a hangar. The Zeldar scrambled to lock onto them. Too late. The humans were gone. The Zeldar fleet was in retreat. From the command deck of the captured war frigate, Elias watched their warship scatter into the void. Their once imposing fleet, which had loomed over human colonies like an executioner's blade, was now a fractured, fleeing mess. Rip wiped alien ichor from his forehead and grinned. So do we officially call that a win? Samara exhaled, fingers still on the terminal where she had just overridden the fleet security. You're alive. We're alive. I'll take it. Juno, monitoring fleet transmissions, smirked. More than that, they're broadcasting distress calls across their empire. We just shattered their entire chain of command. Elias let out a slow breath. Then it's time to send our own message. He turned to Samara. Patch me into their fleet-wide comms. She hesitated, then nodded. A few keystrokes later, the entire Zeldar armada, every warship, every listening outpost, was tuned in. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. This is Captain Elias Drake of the Human Resistance. You came to our worlds expecting weakness. You saw our species as prey. But today you learned the truth. You underestimated us. You thought we were predictable, tame, civilized. And yet here we stand, commanding your ship, breaking your fleets, and tearing down your empire. Remember this day. Remember the humans who stood against you. Because the next time you set foot in our territory, we won't just fight back. We'll make sure you never come back at all. Samara cut the transmission. Silence. Then Rip let out a whoop. Hell yeah. Someone stitched that onto a flag. Juno grinned. You really love hearing yourself talk, huh? Elias chuckled. Only when I know they're listening. Samara's console beeped. Guys? We have a problem. Rip groaned. Do we ever get a break? Samara pulled up the ship's systems. This war frigate is not in good shape. Half the thrusters are down, the power core's unstable, and, oh, fun, the self-destruct is arming itself. Juno paled. Wait, what? Elias clenched his jaw. The Zeldar must have triggered an emergency failsafe before we took over. Samara nodded grimly. 10 minutes, maybe less. Rip cracked his knuckles. Plenty of time. Elias sighed. For what? Rip grinned. Grand Theft warship. The escape. They raced through the ship, dodging still smoldering wreckage from their earlier fight. Samara led the way. There's a Zeldar cruiser docked in a hangar. It's small, but it's our best bet. Rip grinned. You mean we're stealing another ship? Juno groaned. I hate that this is becoming our thing. They burst into the hangar bay. The sleek Zeldar cruiser sat waiting, its engine still humming. Rip let out a low whistle. Now that's an upgrade. Elias sprinted toward the ramp. No time to admire it. Move! A horrible screech erupted behind them. The last surviving Zeldar officer, a towering warlord clad in shimmering armor, lunged forward, wielding an energy glaive crackling with violet plasma. Rip grinned. Oh, hell yes. Elias yanked him back. No time for this. Rip groaned. But now! Elias bellowed. The four of them sprinted up the ramp just as the warlord hurled his glaive. It clanged against the hull, barely missing them. Inside, Samara scrambled to the controls. Engines online, Joe. Elias slammed the thrusters to full. The cruiser blasted out of the hangar, just as, boom, the war frigate erupted, sending debris spiraling in all directions. The shock wave sent their cruiser spinning. Hold on. Elias yelled, wrestling with the controls. The ship lurched, barely stabilizing as flames and wreckage filled the void behind them. Juno exhaled. I never want to do that again. Rip leaned back, folding his arms. You say that now. A new beginning. As their stolen cruiser sped away, the burning wreckage of the Zeldar fleet faded into the distance. Elias finally allowed himself to breathe. We actually pulled it off. Juno checked the NAV systems. Setting course for Osiris Base. We need to let the Resistance know what happened. Samara glanced at Elias. What now? Elias stared out at the stars, his jaw tightening. The war isn't over. Rip smirked. Good. Wouldn't want things to get boring. Elias chuckled, shaking his head. Let's go home. The stolen cruiser's thrusters burned bright as it vanished into the void. The stolen Zeldar interceptor hurtled to the void, its thrusters burning bright against the cold abyss. Inside, the cabin was a mess of flashing red lights and a very stressed-out Samara Patel. This ship was not designed for humans, she growled, jabbing at the alien controls. Elias Drake, gripping the pilot's yoke, gave her a dry glance. Really? I thought the chairs were supposed to stab us in the ribs. Rip O'Reilly, still grinning from their escape, stretched out in his seat. Come on, I think we're adapting well. The ship's still in one piece. The console shrieked. Juno Park, scanning the Zeldar data logs, paled. Incoming warships. They're right behind us. Elias twisted to see the scanner feed. 3 massive Zeldar war frigates were gaining, their plasma cannons charging. Well, he muttered, that's not ideal. Samara furiously rerouted power to the engines. We might outrun them. A shock wave slammed into them. The ship lurched, alarms blaring. Juno gripped her seat. They disabled our FDL drive. Elias swore. All right, new plan. Rip unstrapped himself, flexing his fingers. We board, Em. Samara and Juno turned to stare at him. Elias exhaled. Rip, buddy, that's insane. Rip grinned. And the ship shuddered again. Samara checked the readout. They're pulling us in with a tractor beam. Juno cursed. We just escaped. Now we're getting captured. Rip cracked his knuckles. Not if we kill everyone on board first. Elias considered his options. Fighting a Zeldar frigate with 4 people was suicide, but if they didn't try something, they'd be executed anyway. He sighed. Rip, I hate that this might work. Suit up. The infiltration. The interceptor's hatch clanged open as the ship was dragged into the Zeldar war frigate's hangar. The moment the landing gear touched down, all hell broke loose. Rip vaulted out first, stolen energy blade in hand. The nearest Zeldar warrior barely had time to screech before he was cleaved in half. Samara and Juno dashed behind cover, firing stolen plasma pistols. Sparks flew, alien bodies dropped. Elias shot a guard midstep, then grabbed Juno's shoulder. Find the command deck. We need to disable their fleet controls. Juno nodded, already scanning the layout. Straight ahead, second corridor. Rip, dripping an alien ichor, grinned. Racia. Samara scowled. You're terrifying. They moved fast, weaving through the frigate's corridors. Sirens blared. Zeldar warriors poured in from all sides. Juno ducked under a wild plasma shot. We're getting pinned down. Elias spotted a maintenance hatch overhead. Shortcut. Rip boosted Juno up. She scrambled inside, yanking Samara up next. Elias climbed after them, just as Rip dove in, narrowly avoiding an explosion. They crawled through the vents. Below, Zeldar troops swarmed, unaware. Juno scanned the map. Command decks through the next chamber. Elias nodded. All right, Samara, override the security. Juno, get the fleet transmissions. Rip. Rip kicked down the vent hatch and dropped into the room. Elias sighed. Rip goes berserk. The Berserker moment. The Zeldar officers inside barely had time to react. Rip landed hard, cracking an alien skull against the floor. He whipped his stolen rifle around, firing into the control consoles. Sparks flew. The room exploded into combat. Rip snarled, grabbed a warrior by the throat, and slammed it into another. He twisted, dodging a plasma strike, then lunged, stabbing his energy blade straight through the alien's chest. The Zeldar hesitated. This wasn't right. Humans were supposed to be weak. Predictable. Rip O'Reilly was neither. His face twisted in a feral grin, blood dripping from his forehead. He roared, a sound raw, wild, primal. The Zeldar panicked. They had fought countless species. None fought like this. Not with such fury. Not with such insanity. Elias, Juno, and Samara stormed in, taking advantage of the chaos. Samara plugged into the alien terminal, fingers flying, shutting down fleet defenses. Juno hijacked the comms, broadcasting fleet-wide, telling the other ships their flagship has fallen. Elias shot the last guard. Rip, stop scaring the bugs and get over here. Rip, breathing hard, blinked. What? I was having fun. The ship shook as the Zeldar fleet splintered. The remaining ships, leaderless and in disarray, fled. Elias smirked. Looks like they got the message. The Zeldar did not negotiate. They conquered. Captain Elias Drake had read the reports, analyzed their patterns. Every species of Zeldar encountered fell into two categories, subjugated or eradicated. Their empire spanned hundreds of star systems, built on a doctrine of absolute supremacy. And now, Earth stood in their path. Yet here he was, seated at an absurdly large conference table aboard the Zeldar orbital station Varun, trying to talk them out of annihilating his species. Let me be perfectly clear, said Overlord Varric, his chitinous mandibles clicking with disdain. Your kind is irrelevant. We anticipated resistance from your world, but you are neither strong nor strategically valuable. His multifaceted eyes narrowed. You will be exterminated as a precaution. Juno Park, the team's linguist and designated diplomat, swallowed hard but kept her expression neutral. She had spent weeks studying the Zeldar speech patterns, but nothing prepared her for their sheer arrogance. Elias sighed, leaning back. You don't want to do that. Varric's mandibles twitched. Oh, and why is that? Elias gestured to the team around him. Because humans aren't predictable. The Overlord let out a sharp chittering sound. Zeldar laughter. The other alien officials seated along the glossy black table joined in, a chorus of amusement at the tiny, fragile creatures before them. Rip O'Reilly, the team's wild card, grinned. Man, I hate that laugh. He leaned over to Samara Patel, their engineer and resident genius. Think they've ever seen an Irish guy punch a bug in the face? Samara didn't look up from the holographic interface. She was subtly analyzing. I'd say let's not make that Plan A. Plan A is already dead, Juno muttered. The Overlord rose, his exoskeleton clicking as he towered over them. Enough of this farce. You were permitted here as a courtesy. Now you will be executed. 2 Zeldar warriors flanked the room's only exit, each armed with plasma lances that pulsed with eerie blue light. Elias exhaled through his nose. All right, negotiations over. He glanced at Samara. She met his eyes and gave the smallest of nods. They were ready. All right then, Elias said, standing. Rip, you're up. Rip cracked his knuckles. Finally, with a fluid motion, he grabbed the nearest Zeldar by the mandibles and headbutted it. A sickening crunch echoed through the room. The warrior reeled. Icor sprang across the table. The room erupted into chaos. Juno ducked as plasma fire scorched overhead. Samara smashed the interface she had been studying, triggering a station-wide lockdown scramble. Doors sealing, emergency alarms blaring, the Zeldar's own security system thrown into disarray. Elias grabbed a fallen plasma lance, twisting in his hands before firing a bolt straight into an advancing warrior's chest. Varric stumbled backward, clicking furiously. You barbarians. We get that a lot, Elias quipped, grabbing Juno's arm and pulling her toward the exit as Rip took down another warrior with a well-placed elbow. Samara had already pried open a panel by the door, rewiring the controls with impossible speed. 2 minutes, max, she shouted. We don't have 2 minutes. Juno yelped as another plasma blast struck the table behind them, sending molten shards flying. Rip grabbed the Zeldar's own weapon, aiming it with reckless enthusiasm. What does this button do? Don't, Samara started. A shock wave burst from the weapon, flinging half the room backward. The ceiling cracked. The conference table collapsed in two. Holy hell. Rip blinked. That was awesome. Samara grabbed him by the collar. Never touch alien guns without asking. I regret nothing. Elias ducked as a plasma bolt narrowly missed his head. Less banter, more escaping. The door hissed open just in time, and they bolted into the corridor. Behind them, Overlord Varric screeched. Seal the station. Kill them now. The alarm shifted in tone. Lockdown activated. Elias gritted his teeth. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the entire Zeldar fleet turned its attention to them. Samara, tell me you got a plan. She pulled up a holographic layout of the station. Skimming through options, there's a hangar bay 6 levels down. If we can override the security locks, we can steal a ship. Rip grinned. Now you're talking. Juno frowned. How do we get past? A squad of Zeldar warriors turned the corner ahead, weapons raised. Elias sighed. Figures. Rip twirled his stolen plasma rifle. Okay, now can I go berserk? Elias smirked. Rip, my friend, be as human as possible. Rip roared and charged.